Thank you for joining us wherever you are. This podcast episode is brought to you by the Old Ways Actual Play team. This actual play uses the 7th edition Call of Cthulhu tabletop role-playing game rules by Chaosium. This actual play is performed by adults and in an adult setting. While we try very hard to stick to language for all ages, listeners should know that this podcast may include mature themes. All content, including names, places, events, companies, and etc., that may bear resemblance to entities living or dead, is strictly coincidental. My name is Michael Diamond, and for tonight's game, I will be your keeper. Thank you for joining us again in another episode of the Old Ways podcast. I'm your keeper, Michael, and we return to Masks of Nyarlathotep in our Traveling to the Orient series. And at the top of the show, as we always like to do, we'd like to thank you, our listener, and those of you who are choosing to back the show on Patreon. If you've not had the opportunity to check out what we have to offer on Patreon, I would encourage you to do so at patreon.com/theoldwayspodcast. And now, on to the show, in which we'll begin with introductions. And so, to my right.
This is Tiffany, and I play Maeve O'Shea, and I have reading to do.
Indeed you do. And to Miss O'Shea's right.
This is Morgan. I play Lillian Lane, and I am just here as a watcher. I'm here as a third party.
I have a feeling you're going to be more than a third wheel tonight, Miss Lane. And last but most certainly not least.
This is Alex playing Sam Biron, and I have to learn how to once again make my own pâte feuilletée.
Indeed. So, we're going to raise the curtain tonight on the SS Ormuz, the ship that has been leading the charge into the Indian Ocean and assisting our investigators in traveling to Shanghai. We're about midway through the journey at this point. And so the ship, as you come to know it as your second home now after a couple of weeks, the ship is always churning with something. Whether it's the, feeling of the engines underneath, the vibration that comes up through the deck plates, or the staff members who are seeing to your needs, it truly is a life force all its own. Not as busy as the Aquitania before, nor as cramped as the smuggler's boat that you took to Port Said. But this boat is definitely serviceable. And you've come upon that time, Lillian, where you're certain that research needs to be done. You know that Miss O'Shea had mentioned it, and that Sam had talked about it too. And after your experiences with Sam and the doctor, you know that time period is coming, and the approach to group study is going to be particularly interesting. So what I'd like to do is get an idea of how the three of you are going to gather the day or the evening together. A couple of very simple things. Where will the study be done? And then what time period, what day and time period are you going to start? And then just a somewhat guidance of how you expect to study. And if it's going to be a collaborative effort, perhaps we can make a goulash here at the table and figure out how that collaborative effort is going to be executed. And then after that, we can get into the dirty systematic stuff if we need to.
I would probably approach them, or at least Sam, at breakfast and ask when he is ready to study the book or allow me to look at the book.
That's a great question. So let's say that it is morning. Let's say that it is breakfast. Sam, are you having breakfast with Lillian and some of the rest of the crew then? Or some of the rest of the crew is in the investigator crew, not the crew members?
Sure. Are we assuming that a little bit of time has passed between the surgery and today?
Yeah, we're going to say that, 3 to 5 days have passed since then.
Okay.
So you had time to decompress and to form some of those new handholds a little bit as far as how you're going to maneuver yourself.
I've also been spending some time making preparations for this. is one of the other things that I would have liked to have at least begun putting into place.
Yeah.
I'll answer Maeve first. You're right. There's a lot of work to be done, and I just don't see any reason as to not make the most of the opportunities we have to breathe. If my assumptions are true, I don't have any intention of letting the book out of my sight, but we can talk about why that might be while we work and share our thoughts on the material as it kind of unfolds and maybe learn something from one another. But I'd like to work in my room. I've made some preparations that might make study a bit more controllable, considering we don't necessarily know what might happen.
Okay.
This evening, if you and Lillian would join me, we can begin.
You want to study in the evening?
Well, we can study during the day as well if you want to start tomorrow.
I just think that, having sunlight suits me better.
Certainly. As you see fit, we can study during the day. That actually makes any of the excursions I may have to take with Lillian a bit more fun.
Okay.
Apologies if I seem out of sorts. I'm undergoing therapy with Dr. Tattenbach and the generous assistance of Lillian, and the methodology is quite experimental.
That's fine. I only need the book to learn what spells that I would like to use. And if it makes you feel better holding on to it, that is minor as long as I can read it, because I'll get through it pretty quick. I mean, it's a big book, so it'll be relatively quick, I should say.
I understand the level of efficiency that you have when it comes to study, and I don't plan on holding you back at all. It should be fine.
Okay. I'm done fighting about the books. If that's one little thing that makes you feel better, then, I am fine with it.
As I said, breakfast isn't really where I wanted to talk about it, but we can talk while we work.
Oh, okay.
Are there any any scarring or anything on Sam's head from where the doctor was doing surgery?
Not a one.
It was just a dream.
Sure was. So breakfast goes as quickly or as slowly as the three of you would like. Jack is spending a little bit more time resting, and it seems that he's found a place to play cards with some of the crew here. And he's also spending a little time with a linguist, Professor Lillian, who is teaching him Cantonese. And he's sort of trying as best he can to impart to you what things are in Cantonese.
I'm also learning, but at a different time, I think.
A few hours pass, and you gather in Sam's room to begin your studies. So, Sam, why don't you explain how you've laid the room out?
Sure.
And how you'll approach things.
So a few things. Now that we've had time, I think after spending time traveling and cohabitating, I have a pretty good idea as to what Lillian and Maeve's eating habits are. Day to day, how they tend to function. So my question one would be, what does Maeve typically eat and drink when she's studying specifically? Like, what have I seen carried from service, either on her own plates while she's bouncing back and forth between like her room when she's cramming and like the dining hall, or, what is on her own plates when like the people come and pick them up from outside her room? Like, what does Maeve eat while specifically studying?
Usually she forgets to eat. So it's usually the doctor that brings her whatever. And it's usually like stuff she can pick at, like rolls and crackers and meats and, things like that. Like, so that she doesn't have to take her eyes off the book. But unless she gets really, really hungry, then she'll grab something and it's whatever's most convenient. Honestly, she doesn't have, it's more she gets obsessive about whatever she is studying to finish studying it. And then.
So Maeve does enjoy food, right? She does like food.
It's more of I have to survive.
Okay, so what can I discern that she doesn't detest, I guess? And the other question I have is, what does Lillian tend to eat to keep herself calm? Like, if I can pick a meal that she uses to soothe her brain in such a way that makes like difficult information easier to process or manage, what have I seen her kind of order, grab, fetch, or eat?
Well, probably she would drink a lot of tea because tea is soothing for her. Not like alcohol and all that stuff. Eating wise, probably dessert type stuff. She's a big fan. So stuff like that.
So my plan is to disguise myself as kitchen staff on board the ship and take the time to prepare a meal, paying meticulous attention to my understanding of how they tend to season them post-prep and kind of how they tend to orient them and create like a platter. And then, grab any, if there was going to be like, in this case, like tea, coffee, water, what tends to be, most applicable. And then I would put all that on a tray to be delivered to the room while I go change and get ready. And as far as the prep goes, it would be, a breadboard and cheese and fruit and like snacks for Maeve and for myself and for Lillian as well. I'll be making a millefeuille, or like a stacked puff pastry custard cake. And I cut it into squares and have some other kind of hotter kind of beef pate pastries on the side in case people want protein. So we know how long I'm going to be in here. And I will have those, once I prep the tray in my kitchenware, I will hang the ticket that says what room to deliver it to and when, and then I'll go get situated.
Okay. So is that waiting for them when they walk in, or is it something you're sort of preparing for like a mid-afternoon break, or? It
would be, depending on when we start, it would be like lunch. So if we start in the morning, it would be, if we start at like 10, it would be like noon. And the room, as far as the room goes, I would have at this point absconded with a number of dark sheets from inside, and I would have brought down all the wall hangings and turned around anything glass related, but the bed would have been stowed. And if I needed to, I would have acquired a table.
No, you wouldn't need to.
Okay.
There'd be a table there.
All right. And enough seating for everyone to be comfortable.
Yeah. So this is a normal suite in the first class berths of the Ormuz. So you would have a bed. You'd have a side table. You would have a 4-person circular table, like a family of 4 could sit and eat at. And so if you were to stow the bed, you'd open up an enormous amount of floor space that wouldn't normally be there. And then you'd have, if you pulled the chair away and there were just 3 chairs sort of in this, I guess, triangular configuration around the table, you would have a considerable amount of additional space in the room.
Right. And so the sheets are on the floor and the walls. And I have an abundance of like chalk and charcoal, just in case we need to write things on walls for whatever reason.
I suppose the two of you would be, that's the sort of room you would walk into. It would look like, well, a room engineered to keep out, prying eyes and an awful lot of space.
Is the window still open?
Yes, it would be. And there would be, writing utensils, chalk, paper, a magnifier, things for studying.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so those are made available to everybody, or at least are. And then I guess the next question I have is, when the two of you come in, how are you receiving this space?
Maeve probably has a look of approval and will probably scoot the side table closer to the window so that she can put Slander on it so he can sunbathe. Looks good.
I didn't prepare to feed it.
There are plenty of rodents on the ship, as are on many ships.
Lillian, you're trying to think about all the rats that are probably on this ship.
I didn't know if you're going to ask for a roll or not, but my chemistry roll was prepared for you.
I think we'll leave it in narrative space for the moment. But should the chemistry roll arise, I will absolutely make you Walter White this room.
I've gone to great pains to make sure this meal is good.
Yeah. So more on the meal when it arrives. The book is a rather thick tome.
Mm-hmm.
Its face is etched with an odd design. Right. So when it is placed out or when it is made available for people to view, Lillian, you probably have not seen it, at least not directly. The symbol that rests sort of burned into this leather here, you're not familiar with. You've never seen it before. It actually somewhat doesn't really make sense because it's not completely geometrical. It isn't a pleasing shape. And most designs are supposed to be pleasing to the eye. That is why craftsmen make them. This feels like it was made intentionally to be displeasing, or maybe to make someone look away from it. You get that feeling when the book is laid out.
So the book is going into the center of the table, and it's situated such that any one of us could tilt it, read from it, what have you. And when I put it down, keep my hand on it, I'm going to look at Maeve and ask, were you aware that the ritual that empowered my blade would draw power from the Whisperer in Darkness, whom we would later learn was the Black Pharaoh?
No, but I have a feeling you did something wrong. Inherently, when you do things with sacrifice, it is going to cause ickiness. But if you look, like when Alexandra did her sacrifice, there wasn't damage to plants around it. You know, like her ritual space.
Maeve, I followed your instructions to the letter. I'm not calling your judgment into question. I'm asking you if you knew that the source of that ritual would draw power directly from the Black Pharaoh.
No, I had never cast it.
I will produce the ritual again, like the notes that I have, and I'll put it out there. And I'm not, this isn't a question of blame. The reason that I carry that blade still, the reason that what happened to me happened, he's turned his eyes to me. And I would go as far as to say that he's cursed me in a certain respect. But now I'm cursed with awareness.
Well, part of it is because he gave you a gift. That's what he's looking at. That blade is a gift. This is just my assumptions because it doesn't say anything about which god, whatever you want to call them, entity would bless the blade. I'm assuming he was in the closest proximity.
No, it does. It says it here, the Whisperer in Darkness.
When it got to sacrifice, I didn't look at it, to be honest.
We wouldn't have known who it was. That's not my point. My point is...
But I kind of did. I didn't know it was the Black Pharaoh, but I knew it was bad. I've heard that name. That name was brought up with the black spot from that picture that we found when we were talking about when the Carlisle party was found outside of the forest. There was a black mark on the ground. It came from the Whisperer in Darkness. It had been mentioned before. Did I know that was the same as the Black Pharaoh? No.
I'm not afraid of this book, but I want to make sure that, and I'm hoping that you can help me understand what this might mean if we intend to draw power from the secrets buried in this book and the memoirs of this wizard, and he is present in that text. Do we think that maybe it's just another disguise of his? Because this book was drawn from Gavigan's collection.
Right. Well, I can tell you from the other spells that I do have from this book, I think that this wizard is very much probably kind of like me in the fact that he gathered all the spells that he has found or had stumbled upon and put them all in one place, regardless of who they came from. Like, regardless if it's Black Pharaoh, regardless if it's Yig, regardless if it's whoever else. Regardless, I think we just have to be aware. And that's why even though I learn a spell, doesn't mean I want to cast it. Like we discussed before with you making that blade. Like, I wasn't willing to do what that spell required.
So the other spells in the book that you've learned, I look kind of quizzically, which were they? Which could we, before we delve further, perhaps we should get an understanding as to how large this thing's footprint might be.
Well, the lightning that I cast came from it. That concoction that makes the mist that you used came from it. The couple of spells that Gavigan used, like the one spell that he used on Lawrence with his arm, came from it.
I'm assuming you brought them.
What?
Your spells.
Well, always. I have my book. I slam the tome on the
I kind of
table.
Start. She puts it down back away from the table a bit. Right.
It's a hefty book. Also, the one that I used to protect Jack the first time we went in the tunnels by ourselves came from that book. Also,
do we want to look over them?
I mean, I guess if you want to.
I'm just trying to see if these dots are worth connecting, or if there is more to fear from this.
Oh, you mean if they're with the only one that I would be concerned with as far as connecting with the Black Pharaoh or icky juju of that sort would be Witherlimb.
Why just that one? I mean, we've seen Gavigan use the lightning before.
Because I've used it, and you don't have to call on anybody in particular. You're calling on the forces of nature. Or maybe it's because I work through Yig. I have a buffer.
Which raises another question, and this is something else I wanted to ask you if you had any insight about. When I looked at the ritual, in the best of my understanding, there was no way to reorient the place from which it drew power. Because at that time, I would have preferred to use sources closer to me and in my life and my history.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't. So is that just the nature of this magic, or is it simply because of the way that this ritual is constructed?
Well, Mike, I would like to look at the ritual more closely to see if there would be a way to pull the Black Pharaoh from it and have your own, kind of like my blade, I mean, obviously not my blade because my blade's special, but
well,
would there be a way that I could reorganize the ritual and pull the Black Pharaoh out and insert, I'd only know how to insert Yig in.
Yeah, you would say, hypothetically speaking, you could rewrite the spell to strip out all of the call portions, all of the praise portions, the signals of devotion and signals of desire for that higher power to be infused with, to infuse this weapon with a portion of themselves. And you could rewrite it, but you're talking about ground zero rewriting. It's
right.
Page 1.
Right. So it'd take time.
It would take time. Yeah. But it's not to say that it couldn't be done.
Okay.
As far as you know.
Right. If you had wanted to rewrite this, first of all, you'd have to know all the praises and the names and the blessings from whatever deity you're calling from. And the other thing is that it will take a lot of time to rewrite this, to pull.
But theoretically, this could be a way to liberate us, if you will. Liberate me from the burden.
Well, yeah. The other way is to get rid of that blade.
So I've considered that, but it refuses to be destroyed, and we can't just very well hide it because it will want to be found. It will want to be used. It's
right.
Hungry, and it will find a way. So I am for all intents and purposes its custodian, and I've resigned myself to that fate for as long as I need to.
I guess I shouldn't be shocked that it is that way, considering where it comes from.
So that out of the way, we can talk more about lighter things, I suppose, as we work. Perhaps Lillian can tell you about her participation in my surgery in the walking dreamscape, whatever that place was. Nonetheless, I will spin the book around and push it toward Maeve. You're leading the study, and I'm here to learn from you. And I've hoped that Lillian would join us because in coming to find myself whole, I've always had guidance before to form my directions, my morals. and I wanted to look to someone whom I could trust to point me in the right direction.
Well, I'm going to say this like I've said a million times. When you take on something like this, you have to be willing to sacrifice. Everything costs. Everything costs. So, whether it's unwillingly calling the wrong deity, whether it's sacrifice, whether it's your own mind, whether it's any number of things, when you deal with magic, there is a cost.
So is this a one-way trip for you and your connection to your humanity and the life you led before you became aware, and we are now aware?
I have been instructed that I have to survive, so I will.
But if we find ourselves alive enough on the other end of this, after whatever apocalyptic manifestation is come and gone, what does your life look like after this?
I don't know. My whole goal was to take on this. I am willing to pay the cost for all of us. I was not going to ask anybody to take or pay a cost that maybe they're unwilling to pay. If it means that all of us get to walk away, I will pay it. I have been paying it. It's whatever it takes. But now I have an asterisk because I've been told I must survive. I have something outside of this. I just don't know what it is yet. But I do have a destiny outside of this.
So you tilt the book towards you and you open it up to go back to the place where you left off.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a little while since you've seen this book. And so it takes you a second to sort of thumb through the pages here. And you get to a portion of this story because the Book of Eibon is really a story.
Mm-hmm. Right, of the mage's travels, right?
Right. Through Hyperborea, the world of Hyperborea, and the lands that existed before the ones that you know currently. And these strange places filled with all sorts of strange creatures, people. The book is mostly a series of legends about the wizard's travels. The pages here are very brittle. So you're almost like an archivist, very carefully examining each page.
Mm-hmm.
The story you unearth when you get back to the section that you think you last left off on is a story about Eibon standing outside this castle on a green meadow. And on this meadow, he is challenged by the local authorities to prove that he is as powerful as the legends say he is. And he wears a very luxurious, thick wizard's robe. And when they challenge him in this story, he draws this power from within himself and electrifies his body. He doesn't call it down from the heavens. He doesn't beseech some deity for it. He draws it from within himself, and he reaches out and drapes his body with this electric green aura to show how amazingly powerful he is. And the guards are stunned at this sight. And their minds rack with this unbelievable panic. They've never seen someone draw an energy like that to themselves. They've never witnessed someone of Eibon's talents. And they are dumbstruck. Some of them run into the fields beyond. Some of them try to attack Eibon directly, which he is able to fend away. Several of them just stand there in awe of his power. And after he proves it to these guards that he is who he says he is, he approaches each one and begins muttering these words of soothing to them. He begins incanting in an ancient tongue a method of calming their minds and steadying them. And it goes through this sing-song passage over and over, a rhyme, if you will. And you get through probably a good page or so of this rhyme, an intricate rhyme, before you realize that what you're reading is a spell.
Mm-hmm.
And its purpose is to calm the mind, fortify the body, and ensure a more pleasant existence. And the idea at the end of this working is to draw a symbol that you have seen before in other books. And that is of a branch that extends at several different spaces. It's a thick reed in the middle, and there are several smaller branches off of it. And it is to ward the mind and calm it from states of panic. And so my question to you, Miss O'Shea, is when you read about this, how are you correlating it to the people in the room?
I would probably read the story and then break down to there's a long incantation to the spell, and then draw out the symbol and tell them, what it does and how it has to come from within. If you do not have the power or the willing or the calmness within yourself, you cannot calm others.
Okay. For the two of you, it's a rather interesting story. Especially are you going to recite any of the actual verses, the song itself that he talks about?
Oh, yeah. Probably not fully through. I'll probably give him the Cliff's Notes.
Mm-hmm. So the interesting portion for the two of you who are in the room hearing this is because of the way that you read those words.
And I probably would sing them because he was singing.
Right. So you get you hear her sing them again in sort of this, I don't want to say it's a strange, it's like a series of strange flute sounds when she sings them, when she actually enunciates the words. And it is very peaceful. It's a little haunting, but it is very peaceful. That is the pre-lunch portion of the study that you guys get through. Sam, are you planning on actually studying the text as well, or letting her?
Yes. So I'm basically once Maeve has gone through a section, I was going to kind of insert myself. And so one of the things that Sam learned from Elias early on was how to study like Jackson Elias. That's all he knows, though. It's all he knows is how to study material as he was taught. And so he's kind of learning now how to study like Maeve. So the pathway that she takes as far as what does she annotate, what does she make a point to review, either from where I can see her eyes are going or what she specifically, tends to go over and zero it on, paying attention to the detail that she is obviously well skilled in research, absorbing the path she takes so that I can try.
Okay, so here's what I'd like. It is a intelligence roll to learn any spell. And so if you would make that intelligence roll for me, and we'll see where it goes from there.
31 under 90.
Okay.
37 under 65.
Okay, that's almost a hard success. I suppose then it's important to ask you, Miss Lane, are you participating in any portion of the actual spell learning?
So I have a question about that spell.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm sitting here listening to, Maeve talk about the story and everything. So if you do that spell, does it fortify or does it ward it from states of panic, permanently? If I were to do that spell, would it ward my mind permanently from states of panic? Or is it temporary?
You're not sure? You're not sure. I suppose then if you were to, because you read some French, yeah? So
yeah, she's the one who taught me French.
Yeah.
But I don't need it anymore.
So, right. Well, so in your reading of the story, the wizard Eibon passes by the men and gives them this sign and recants this message. He does say therein that the men would recover and feel better, but he makes no claim of its permanency. So you don't believe it's permanent?
I have a question, and this is something that I probably would never have zeroed in on had I not seen Maeve read and recite. So she's reading French text, but she's not speaking French.
No, she probably would fall back, especially in recitation, would fall back to speaking a language you're not familiar with.
Mm-hmm. And that's the language I would be comfortable singing in.
Correct. Its comfortability is not even that's a toe tip, a toe, dipped in the water word for it. It's a default.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's something that you would glean pretty quickly when she recites this song. It's not the song for you is easily readable in French, but for her when she speaks it, that's not French when she talks.
So I think what might be worth doing then, because I know that a lot of things are lost in interpretation, and I'm not doubting the veracity of what she's saying and like the clarity of the material she's reading, but if I were to look at the same text in French and recite it in French, does it, like you can have a body of text written in one language, translate it to another language, and like the messaging changes?
Oh yeah.
So what's different about the French version of this story as I read it to myself and Lillian? Like is there a tonal shift?
A couple things. There's not so much a tonal shift, but there are some. The way Eibon holds himself is a little different. So in the French version that you read, he probably is a little bit softer, and in the way this melody is sung back to you from when Miss O'Shea does it, he seems a little more secretive. The way the story seems in her language is that it leans more heavily on the fact that Eibon is sharing a secret with them. And in the French version, it's more like a mother trying to comfort their child. Right? So,
like a nursery rhyme.
Yeah, it's like a nursery rhyme. And actually, for you, Miss Lane, reading this in French is rather compelling because it's telling a fantastic story in French, and then you get this sort of rhythm, this sort of singing. So you get basically an earworm when you read the song because it's very pleasant. It's a very pleasant and calming melody when you sit and read it. You're like, oh, that's nice. And then it kind of gets stuck in your head.
Well, I don't think I want to learn the spells. I'm here for Sam moral support. And I know that Maeve and Sam have butt heads in the past, so I'm kind of here as a mediator. In case
sure
anything rears its ugly head. So I've already got enough problems with psychometry. I don't need the additional capability of being able to cast any spells.
I mean, that's totally up to you. You are welcome to not learn it. There's nothing that says that you have to. Okay. I just wanted to check. I just wanted to see. So the two of you systematically then will learn a spell called Earthly Sign. So this inhibits the ability to feel pain and brings a calm state of the mind for a limited time to the recipient of this spell. Once cast, the spell causes its target to feel no pain for 1 hour. Rolls to remain conscious, like major wounds, which as pulp characters you wouldn't feel anyway, are ignored during this period. And the target receives a temporary boost of 4 hit points. In addition, for 1 hour, the target's mind is serene. Phobias and manias can be ignored. Insanity losses are noted but not deducted until the spell's effect ends.
Oh man, that's nasty. That's like a barbarian coming down from raid.
It is.
It's like a pain editor.
It is exactly like a pain editor, actually. So any sand loss is deducted at full at this point, which may provoke a bout of badness, and so on. But that is the first spell that you will learn before today, before lunch. And when lunch comes in, ladies, you would notice that it has been quite tailored to your preferences, oddly. The utmost of care has been taken into collecting trays for things that you would be interested in eating. They knock on your door, Sam?
Second. Hold that wizard. I'm gonna go to the door and I'll open it enough. Thank you. You can leave it outside.
They leave it outside.
I'll wait until they leave and then pull the tray in and unload all of the dishes and pull the metal pans off and pour some tea.
I do like tea.
Indeed you do.
I take a cup of tea. Thanks, you didn't have to have, food brought in, but...
Actually, I made it. I will provide her with the dessert.
I do like cake. It's cake, right? Cake-ish?
It's a custard puff pastry.
Oh, well, that's even better. I take a bite and with a thoughtful bite. And this is really good. Where did you learn to cook?
As she eats, I am reminded of the fact that she does know that I assassinated a dignitary after poisoning him for the better part of a year. But I let that thought just kind of check its way out.
You find it encouraging, Sam, is that she's still willing to eat the food that you made.
In another life that I thought I'd lost. But I, thanks to you and the doctor, can once again remember and share.
It dawns on me where he might have learned to cook at based on our time together and discussion, and I just slowly nod and put my plate down. No, I can't. I keep eating.
It's my mother's recipe, actually.
It is very good.
If we hit like a pause point, Maeve is finishing notating the spell in her spell book. We've all kind of collected ourselves and the food has arrived. Everybody's kind of, I had my exchange with Lillian. I would look to Maeve while she is kind of wrapping that piece up, and I would begin making conversation. So, how do you feel about Cairo? Like the outcome for the people, security, where we ended things, what was done was undone?
I believe that the right forces have a better chance of protecting it now that we upset that balance. I don't think everything was done that could have been done.
Like the ritual.
Which ritual?
The one that we got from Kafur, the capstone, the pyramid.
Oh, yes. Yes, I wish we would have had time for that. Because that was a powerful protection spell. But that would have taken a lot and also cost a lot. Cost a lot of people or beings. That's why I was hesitant to do it. I just hope that we gave the right people and the right forces enough room to make their move.
Did you know that Swift wanted to resurrect Nyarlathotep and take the power from themselves?
No.
Would it have changed anything for you if you had?
That in and of itself, no. What would have caused me pause was had I known there were sacrifice.
So you were comfortable bringing back Nyarlathotep under the guise of being under control of this person.
She has a closer connection than I do. I would believe that she was meant to have that power for a reason. Also having, I guess, if you're choosing the two, who would have Nyarlathotep, Alexandra, or Omar, I would choose her.
Not that it matters now, but there was a third option, right? No one gets it.
If you think that that body would have been easily destroyed, you're fooling yourself. Did you look at it?
I decapitated it. I'm well aware of how tall it was.
After.
No, it fought back, for sure. But nonetheless, I've no doubt that blade would have, either that blade or even the blade that was sworn to protect it, that Otto fell with. Between the two of us, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, that is a possibility. Yeah,
I
suppose, yeah, with a magic weapon. I mean, they're meant to fight things like that.
If we assume that, the forces of Yig at this point are positioned, how do you think Yig fits into this quarrel with the Black Pharaoh? Like, how do we know if other followers or cultists of Yig are worthy of our trust as a group? Does their loyalty imply trustworthiness to you personally?
I mean, I think for myself, but I would think, yes, that we're all... Here's the big difference, right? The Black Pharaoh, the Crawling Chaos, Whisper in the Darkness, all of that wants to destroy the world. Yig lives on this world, in this world. He does not want it destroyed. Therefore, we have an ally in that.
But an ally that wants to rule Cairo.
I mean, his home is Cairo. Well, not Cairo, but Egypt in particular. His homeland is there. I don't know if it's necessarily a rule.
From what I understand historically, the speakers of the Nile held positions of authority and dominated the land before they fell.
Yes and no, but it wasn't authoritarian, Like it wasn't...
It was matriarchal, was it not?
Well, it was, sure, but I didn't see it as cruel or mean, or it would be positioning any king or queen in where I think the Black Pharaoh is inherently evil.
I'm not arguing that. And I'm not arguing against what's there. My concern is that we left a pharaoh behind that's going to, in my opinion, want to reclaim their position as pharaoh.
If they can. The thing is, you have to find somebody that can hold his power.
Not his power, her power.
Oh, you mean Alexandra?
No, Nyarlathotep was a pharaoh.
Oh, yes, sure.
I don't know if I can necessarily abide trusting any particular worshiper of any particular religion. People have their agendas and their means, and I don't know that worship alone gives them consideration. I trust your judgment, and I trust that you are going to do your absolute best to protect this group.
Well, it's kind of like anybody that follows any religion. There are going to be good ones, and there are going to be pretenders.
Was Alexandra a pretender because she chose to sacrifice her followers?
No, I believe that's what Yig wanted her to do. I believe that's what was required to happen, and she was willing to make that step. If that means that I don't get to her level because I'm not willing to do that, then so be it. But it doesn't mean that I don't believe, or I don't follow, or I don't love him any less. It just means I have a line.
Sure, but she's a person, and people are subject to things like hubris and power hunger.
Agree.
As I said, if we find ourselves again alive enough to return to Cairo, and I were to say take it upon myself to decide to send Nyarlathotep back to the afterlife where she belongs, would you see that as worth doing, or do you think that they'll serve Cairo's best interests?
I would hope that if she is truly listening to Yig and what he would want, that I think it is in their best interest. If she has taken it upon herself to take that power and use it for herself, that's a different story. The only thing I can do right now is trust that he knows, he has the cards laid out. I know that I have something that I have to survive for, and I know that he will help me. It doesn't mean I'm safe at all. It just means
None of us are.
that there's a plan. And I'm not privy to it because I have a wee brain.
Well, perhaps we'll be able to formulate our own plans.
Just know that I have a line that I don't cross. I have not lost myself because I believe or have asked for the blessing and have gotten gifts from him. That it doesn't mean that I am not a person, that I'm not me.
I'll kind of quietly nod to the book, I guess, and sip my tea.
In continuing your study, Miss O'Shea, you come upon some pages which reference older works. Works you've seen before, but nonetheless are important. So some of these are spell works that you have seen before.
Mm-hmm.
Some of you have never seen said props, but they are fancy.
Yeah, I recognize
Wow.
these two.
And you recognize this one. So you find a way to pass over some of these spell works that you are already aware of. The travels that the wizard takes continue on through this new countryside. He passes by this castle and continues on until he reads from some sort of ancient stone tablet beside what looks like a washed out lake. And while you recall, or recite this story, Miss O'Shea, you get a very powerful sensation right on your collarbone, down here into this point on your chest, just at the top of it. And oddly enough, when you react to it, because it causes a physical reaction, Lillian, you have the same feeling, although not in the same space. What you feel, Miss O'Shea, is your stone get really warm.
Okay.
Almost uncomfortably warm. And as this story of Eibon continues, he discusses being by a lake, a deep lake, with this massive stone monolith outside of it. It's irregularly shaped, it's gray, black stone, and it's got very, very odd carvings on top of it. And he realizes that it is a standing stone which would allow the user to pass through both time and space in great distances. And you see in the text here, he has somewhat of a humorous response to finding this thing, as if it's beneath him, as if he would require such a massive foci to create such a mystical response. And he begins to tell a story about himself while you get like a side narration from Eibon about how he learned to move through time and space. And he begins reciting this oratory that he learned from a wizard who traveled the plains of Lang, and how he moved through time and space by understanding the mythical and mystical calculations of what creates distance in the mind, and that those who travel by way of these gates or more understanding their body and how it correlates to the position point that it is on the map, and then correctly calculating how to move those position points to a different spot. And for those of you listening, this feels like going to like an advanced math class for the next 3 or 4 hours, because he goes in depth to these calculations. And he talks through how to make the symbols, each one very intricately. And there are probably 15 in total that deal with X, Y, and Z axes, and then all these different points along the way. And he performs this massive ritual to move himself while he's standing outside this stone for the purposes of showing any entities which may be watching or listening that it is far easier to do it his way than to do it in honor or in deference to some deity which is the way the stone would have you do it. And when the spell completes, his description shifts to a massive cavern. It's so massive, it clouds the sun. And it is only a pinpoint in the distance. And he talks about having traveled to the other side of the Dreamlands, where there are caverns so large that there are mountain ranges within the caverns, and that they have their own climates and their own peoples that live there. And it is a fascinating tale that by the time you are done reading it, it has gotten late into the evening, but your brain is trying to sort of comprehend everything. And we'll see if it does. So
how much does this remind me of what? So when Kufur was getting attacked, I'll talk through this with the room as well. Yep. When Kufur was being attacked in his home, Omar emerged as if from out of nowhere, from a shadow. He stepped into the room from nothingness. If Eibon is seeming to buck whatever this travel method being offered to him is, perhaps that is a reflection of the path that Omar chose, which maybe means that this other way is another way. Or my concern is, if that is the only thing being explicitly described in this tome, what if he was misled?
The only way that we're going to be able to find out, first of all, is to get through all of his stories and piece it together.
I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
The other way is to examine the ritual and how it's done. This one's done by math and celestial placement and being in tune with your body and stuff, instead of calling and praising to someone in particular, which is what he was against. And if he holds out that way, I think it benefits everybody, because then you're not in debt to anyone and you're not calling to anyone in particular. That's very much the impression I got from the lightning, was that it was very much your own will instead of calling to someone.
Well, I guess the only thing that we stand to be wary of is the fact that we know that he is a being of infinite lies and misdirection and deception.
Of course.
However, please proceed.
My other thought too is, if it seemed like Omar came from a shadow, that may be particular to the Black Pharaoh. I could see him being able to travel to be able to step into one shadow and come out of another, potentially, or use darkness as a cloak, or, I mean, there's many things, but that fits within, I think, the theme or the
motif,
the feel, of the Black Pharaoh in that way. He was very dramatic when we met him, may I just say.
Yes, he is much about his presence in the room.
Right. So I could see a lot of that, like, being, I could see him also being very upset if somebody used something that wasn't specifically praising him. But I could be wrong. It's not like I intimately know this deity, thankfully.
So, intelligence checks, if both of you would.
68 out of 90.
Okay.
That is a hard success, 31 out of 65.
Okay. So the spell contained therein is quite potent. It is the last spell that you will learn tonight, given the hour or so hours that it has gotten to. This spell is Create Gate. So gate spells are sort of their own thing, but the long and short of it is gate has a cost which is variable based on the distance you are trying to travel. you have the ability to create a gate. There's an entire table for it, what you would refer to when we talk about distant. It costs 1 sand to cast, and the casting time is 1 hour per point of POW spent.
Oh, it costs POW?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, what'd you say, 1 hour per POW?
Mm-hmm. Yes. But I'll give you a slight teaser, if you don't mind. So if I wanted to travel, say, 100 miles or up to 100 miles / light years, let's not worry about the other one. It would cost me 5 POW and 1 magic point. I could travel up to 100 miles in the blink of an eye, roughly speaking. After, of course, I spent the time casting it. Now,
yeah, because that would take 5 hours then.
It would, yes.
Okay.
If I were to say, try to something a little bit more earnest, and say, be willing to sacrifice 20 POW, which would be a lot. It would cost 4 magic points, and I could travel 100,000 miles, which is, of course, out of the Earth's, space.
Much further than the pretenders will ever go for you.
Correct. You could spend 10 POW and go 1,000 miles, which would be just about how far they would go.
Gate implies like a door. Is it open a door like that other people could pass through?
So a gate could be anything that the gate spell is bound to. So you could bind
it to a door.
You could bind it to a door.
Or a portal.
You could bind it to a swimming pool. You could bind it to a part in the ocean. And the thing is that gates aren't always visible. In fact, most times
like a red smoky door at the bottom of a stairwell, like that kind of door.
Yeah, it could.
So does the spell that you're talking about, and I'm not learning the spell, but I was listening to the story. Can it take you to like other dimensions and whatnot? Or is it just on the earthly plane?
You're not really sure, but you think it might be able to.
So how much does this remind me of our trip with Dr. Tottenbach?
It reminds you of the trip in the sense that you went somewhere else, but you're not certain. You're not certain what the doctor uses was this spell. You've never seen the doctor cast a spell.
Right. He didn't say words or anything, but if you're saying that, I know you said that out of game though, that they could be something.
That's true, I did.
So, well, damn.
I mean,
you didn't say that to Lillian.
My deduction would be that you'd have to be familiar with that place to be able to make a gate there.
I don't think I'd want a blind gate anywhere, just FYI.
Right?
So the two of you continue on through that night until you've completely understood this massive travel incantation. And Sam, the one thing that is a true takeaway from you learning it is this. There are magics that you have now learned that are not tied to anyone. They are simply the way the fabric of the universe works. And that is almost, it's enlightening, but also almost very positive for you to learn.
And it's framework shattering too. Like the limitation space is kind of been exploded considerably.
So since you are doing a skim of this book in this sense, Sam, I'm going to have you make a sand roll.
Sure. That is a 30 under 70 hard success. We are keeping our brains on tight today.
You have an int roll, I think, too. Or is that only if you fail?
That's only...
Oh.
You trying to come for my sanity?
Yeah.
Leave me alone.
I'm bringing you down to my level.
That's not anytime soon.
Well, the thing with mystical tomes, though, is that for those of them that have spells in them, generally speaking, the sand loss is automatic.
Yeah, I understand.
And so there's a min that you lose automatically. And I'll roll that now.
If I remember, it was kind of hefty.
It's not too bad. I mean, I say that as someone who's not hitting the sand loss. That's important to know. Okay, so it's 2d4, so you're going to lose 4 sand.
Okay.
From reading what you have done. This is effectively a skim of the book, plus some spells that you've now learned. It is truly reality shattering, right? Because you have seen spells now that do a very varied amount of things. You have seen spells that will soothe, and you have seen spells that will drive men mad. You've been subjected to one specifically. It's very difficult to take both in the same hand. That's really what you struggle with, right? You struggle with it for a few moments until understanding, obviously, that there is both good and bad in the earth, both good and bad outside of earth. And at least it seems that you and Miss O'Shea have found a way to forge some sort of working environment together.
Well, it seems like it's through something as simple as good or bad, there is the truth. And this is the truth of our reality and how busted it is.
Oh yeah.
So as we're wrapping up, I'll take a sheet from my notes that I've been doodling on, and I will pass it across the table to Maeve. And it's just basically a list. At your discretion and at your leisure, these are the things that I know that you are aware of and that we've seen used, that if you would impart to me, I can only hope that you would trust me to be responsible with.
Okay. I'll look at them.
Yeah, in it describes the sigil of protection that has been used on the train, that was used in the rooms, that we've seen inscribed in panic and in blood upon many a floor.
Mm-hmm.
There is the channeling of the lightning. There is the subservience, the ability to command obedience from creatures that I've seen. And at this point, I saw Alexandra use it on that thing.
I learned that one from Meave, though, right?
Which one?
Dominate.
Yep.
Okay.
You learned that from Swift's tome.
Mm-hmm.
And I also mentioned that I found it very I found Maeve's ability to defy gravity very interesting and much more convenient than climbing. I include my notes because since I remember Simon, I include my notes on the mist breath recipe and whether or not my description is accurate and concise. And I'll include her anecdote about her excursion with Jack in the catacombs that I didn't know about. I'm assuming was part of their hunt for the mummy, and how she found fit to kind of, fortify him against harm.
Well, then I will bookmark the pages in the Book of Eibon, because levitate, mist breath, lightning. No, lightning came from a scroll.
Right.
That one came from a scroll. So it's mist breath, levitate, and I think flesh ward are all in there.
Yeah.
So those are in there. I can look up the lightning. I will warn you that the lightning costs a lot, and it's not a cost like it's going to harm you. It's your essence inside, and if you use all of your powerful inner essence, it can really harm you. I can give you the spell, but just be careful, because if you don't have enough of that, it will sting.
I'll also mention in my notes that it always seems apparent that the most potent of these followers seem to be in possession of those sticks, and whether or not those are
the
things
scepters
that we should look to acquire, like what purpose they, like we know what we've been told at this point is that they're kind of like, they can serve as protection.
Yes.
And there's some sort of battery.
Yes.
There's some sort of reserve.
Yes. Both of those are correct, but I gave the other set of scepters to the doctor.
No, and that's fine. What I'm thinking is there has to be other methods of preserving that kind of energy outside of, confining it to those particular rods. So
well, I would assume that there's a spell somewhere for both of those that we could bind to items of our own. I just haven't found the spell yet. So these are convenient because they happen to be laying around.
On bodies and such, yeah.
Right. And then Dominate, I can't give you. Because you have to be a follower of Yig.
Like I said, at your discretion.
That's the only one, because it came from a tome from a follower. If I get the okay to share it with you, then I will. But as far as
for your consideration, and this is because I know you appreciate study, and I know that you would not use such a thing flippantly based on your assessment of the blade ritual. Mm-hmm. I think that this might prove to help us or help me reorient appropriately. And I will show her my etchings of the contact bast spell.
That is a spell you were not aware of.
Have you been in contact with Bast?
Not I haven't contacted Bast, but Bast has been in contact with me through the servant that we talked about this. Were we not? Did we talk? We talked about this.
Right. Yeah. No.
The priestess.
Yeah.
Yes. In the cistern, helped me recover and helped me find some centering and some solace through independence of thought and freedom and survival, which seems to be themes that resonate with one such as Bast.
Yes. The only thing is if you contact anyone, you have to be prepared to make a deal, or you better have something concise and to the point to ask.
I will allow my eyes to wander from Maeve's gaze to my harness, which is hanging on the wall, where the machete and the shotgun are kind of just hanging in an X. I'm thinking she might be helpful.
I'm not doubting that. She does not seem like... She seems like a neutral party, as neutral as she can be. But there's always something that they want in return. I don't care who, what, where they come from. Just be prepared. The same is if I ask Yig for anything. Just, I am blessed. However, sometimes there has to be a trade.
Well, again, while my conversations with Bast have been indirect, it seems that her designs for me are curiosity at this juncture.
She is a cat.
I do appreciate the time, and I'm looking forward to our next session. If you like, you can, if you have the time, I have some things to do with Lillian, if you're up for some fun.
Oh, I have to get to my Cantonese lesson, actually.
Understood.
On that note, we are going to call this episode to a close. And as always, thank you for joining us for another episode of Masks of Nyarlathotep. Our journey to the Orient continues, and we'll see you next week.